just we can get started. So before Archika goes, I'm just gonna go ahead and introduce stuff. So we'd like it if you guys could all be on camera just so we can see your faces and get like a good idea for the for how like the audience is feeling. Also make sure you're muted unless you're speaking so that there's no extra distraction. And at the end of her talk, there will be a Q&A, so feel free to raise your hand at the end by clicking in participants and raising your hand. And you can also put questions in chat. So Archika is a incoming freshman at Princeton University, and she's also the co-founder of EduSTEM, and she's done a lot of other things like interned for NASA. You can see like Stanford, Washington University, and I recently was able to be a counselor at one of the campuses at EduSTEM, and it was really cool seeing how much initiative she had and how much passion she had for teaching STEM and combining STEM with so many different like areas of life. So I'm super excited to have her, and she's going to be talking about like career and how she started her nonprofit, as well as the college application process, which I think for a lot of us is like really good to hear about because she got into Princeton. So, and a lot of us are like thinking this summer of like how to do that. And so I think it's going to be really awesome to hear from her. So yeah, without further ado, Archika.
Thank you so much again for inviting me to this. This is such a cool opportunity for students, especially during quarantine, where there's a lot of opportunities that aren't really there that we used to have in person, and you've just transformed that into a virtual experience, which is awesome. So before I start and before I share my screen, in the chat, can everyone kind of put like what grade they're in high school so I can get a better understanding of the demographics on the call? And if you want to put where you're from too, that's totally valid too. Rising 11th, 10th, senior, 11th, senior. Okay, cool. So generally later high school, that's awesome. So I'm gonna share my screen now. Let's see. Okay. Perfect. So this talk is gonna be kind of just some tips, tricks, and advice that I've had as someone who's just graduated from high school, whether that's related to career exploration, college apps, as Jada mentioned, or the community outreach and activism that I've done since my freshman year. So it's really defined my high school experience. But before we start, I do want to introduce myself a little bit in a more casual way. So you can see my dog in the upper left-hand corner. She's super cute. Her name's Cora. She's 8 months old, and she's definitely been who I've been spending quarantine with for the past few months. And some things that I like to do is I'm a Seattle native, so I love to explore. I love to play outside, and I have a major sweet tooth, and I love Thai food as well. So I love ice cream, brownies, donuts, whatever is sweet out there. I'm pretty sure I love it. And as Jada mentioned, I will be attending Princeton this fall, hopefully on campus. I'm crossing my fingers. They haven't announced anything, but that's a little bit of an introduction from my end. So how this talk will go is that it'll probably start a little bit more career oriented. So I'm personally very interested in computer science. So I'll talk about how I got started and pursued computer science throughout high school. And then community service, which is definitely my biggest passion and something that I've loved to work on over the past 4 years. And then college, which I like to call like a small process in a much bigger picture. But it feels really important, especially during this time, as many of you guys are going into 11th and 12th grade. And then questions. And I think this probably will be a little bit of a different mentor talk than previously, because I'm basically your guys' age, just a little bit older, but I've really realized over time that some of the best mentors are people who have just gone through what you're going to experience, because, you know, there's a bunch of old people that'll be like, here are my life lessons from like 20 years ago when I was going through X, Y, and Z. But people who you not only can learn from through their stories, but also through their like very recent experiences are sometimes the best mentors. So some of my favorite ones are people who've just entered college, graduated from college, etc. So also I'll keep the chat open if I can, just in case anything pops up. Oh, someone said that CS and community service are their strong passions too, which is awesome. So definitely if you have any questions at the end, we'll have time for that. Okay, but first let's talk about me in middle school. In middle school, I was a very, very different person. So basically, as you can see here, my schedule was basically to play soccer, to play softball, to sleep, and then repeat that every single day of the week. So that was like 5 to 7 days. I would just go to school and then go to 2 practices a night and then play tournaments on the weekend. And I really did not care about school as much as I should have in middle school, which I thought at that point I was like, when I entered freshman year, I was like, maybe I should have like cared more about it. Maybe I should have, found like some clubs or activities that I really liked. But I'm actually really thankful for that, because if there's a time to do this, it's middle school. When you get into high school, I had the opportunity to try a lot of new things. So I wasn't really into sports as much in high school. I still played on my school teams, but I kind of did a 360 in a sense. So what really was that like turning point for me to do that 360? And that kind of leads into my journey starting computer science. My first computer science class ever was a room of 30 boys and 1 girl. And I remember this was the end of 8th grade, kind of coming out of middle school. I was like, let me try something new. Like Seattle was a super tech concentrated area. So I was like, why not sign up for a CS camp? So I go into the room and there's like 30 boys. So I sit at a desktop station next to a boy, and he taps me on my shoulder and asks me, are you sure you signed up for the right class? And I was like, like, how do I answer this? Like, yes, I'm in the right room. My name's on the roster. Like, is that what you're asking? But I realized that's not actually what he was asking. He was more like, are you sure you belong here? Which was a really common theme that I faced during my earlier experiences in computer science, that lack of a sense of belonging, and also in a way this kind of like alienation that you feel when you don't see a lot of other girls around you, or especially people from all kinds of backgrounds, whether it's racial backgrounds, socioeconomic, etc. It's a very homogenous field. But what changed my path going into high school was this really pivotal program at the end of my freshman year. So even though I had a bad experience in that particular CS class, I was really enamored with the ability of technology to catalyze a lot of social impact. So during my freshman year, I started Technology Student Association at my school, and we didn't have a single chapter in our school district. So we kind of pioneered that, which was really cool to see us attending those state and national conferences throughout high school. I also participated in Science National Honor Society, where I kind of combined my love for writing with the sciences and did the scientific journalism piece. And then what was really pivotal was that summer attending the Stanford Artificial Intelligence Research Program. So its acronym is called SAILORS. It's for rising 9th or 10th graders, girls around the world. So my year they chose 32 girls from all different kinds of countries to attend this program and really learn about AI and machine learning in a hands-on way. So this was a really amazing experience to join basically a sisterhood of girls really interested in making an impact through computer science. And that's where I felt like I belonged in this space. I felt like I had a voice in tech, and it really made me feel like I had that community, I had that network, and I had that support system. So these are just some pictures from the camp experience. I know Jada was at camp, and I mentioned this professor, Fei Li. She's a professor at Stanford and one of the pioneers in computer vision, a field of AI, and she was super inspiring to hear from. And these role models and friends really have carried through 3 years later. So now we're all basically still in contact. We had like a reunion call just a few weeks ago, and they're all doing really incredible things as well. So this program was definitely, I would rate it an A+ and a really, really monumental part of my high school experience. And I'm really lucky that it actually happened early, because it gave me a lot of room to continue exploring CS over the next 4 years. So that summer in 2017, I did the AI research program. And then the next summer in 2018, I interned for NASA in Texas. And then in 2018, for the end of that summer, I did some research at a local lab at University of Washington. And then these past like 9 months or so, I've been interning at Sensoria throughout my senior year, and I'm still continuing that as well. So a lot of diverse kinds of experiences, and starting with sailors. So what did I actually do at that program? I know I made a lot of friends. I had a lot of cool experiences with the people I met and the talks that were given, but we all had our own research projects that we worked on in teams. And mine was a computer vision based project. And computer vision is basically training AI to kind of see the world through some means, usually images. So our goal was
no. I'm going to the meeting.
Uganda through looking at government data and satellite imagery of Uganda. So it was a really amazing experience to take in this data. We had all of these images, and then we converted it to a map where we predicted regions of areas that were below the poverty level in Uganda and above. And obviously this is a really simplified version of predicting poverty, but this was kind of what we came up with. So these were the actual labels on the leftmost, and then the logistic regression model, which is what we programmed and trained, is right next to it. And you can see that it's actually quite a bit more accurate than if you were to just put a random guesser or a majority guesser. In fact, I think it had around an 88% accuracy. So that was really empowering for me to realize that AI can be applied to a lot of equity-based issues, including poverty, resource redistribution. So I thought that was an amazing experience. And then the next summer at NASA, that was also equally incredible. And this was a high school internship program for students across the nation. So I think they selected around 45 interns and put them into different teams. So I was on a team of 4 with 2 people from Texas and then 1 person from California. And we got to work on this web application contextualizing heavy precipitation data with regional demographics. So it kind of served as a flood response resource where you could be like, okay, so it was out in the aftermath of a ton of like hurricanes and storms like Hurricane Harvey and other natural disasters. So really pertinent and relevant to what was going on then. And you were able to basically predict the weather or the precipitation in certain regions, and then look at the demographics of those regions to see which one would probably need assistance the fastest and the most. So some of these demographics included poverty, which at times often indicates lack of infrastructure development in those neighborhoods or regions or counties. Also population density, obviously where there's the most people, there's the most imminent need to bring natural disaster resources areas, and then soil moisture, which was kind of an environmental supplement to the precipitation data, because it showed how much water log was already in those regions, and along with lake levels. So it was really cool. If you can see this pop up, it's pretty small, but it says percent of river full as of May 6th, 2020, and 99.3%. So if a lake is already full and if like heavy precipitation is, that's probably also great news. So that was the project that I worked on at NASA, and at the end we got to present it to NASA researchers and scientists, and it was a really fulfilling experience, and again, incredibly intersectional. We were not only dealing with computer science related topics and issues, but also environmental and then public policy related, and looking at human demographics in general, and kind of interpret how do we help certain regions, or do we need to help certain regions more than others. And then later that summer, I did some neuroscience related CS work at the UW. So that was mainly mapping brain regions and predicting like connectivities between different brain regions. So for example, in this experiment, they were playing a noise in someone's left ear. And when an action or stimulus happens, the brain has different regions that light up at different times. Like lighting up means like they just basically get activated. And they wanted to see if there was not causation, but correlations between different brain regions getting activated due to different stimuli. So that's what I was working on. And then a little project I did at the end was actually predicting basketball player motivations based off of their movements. So over here is kind of a graph that I made that was kind of the beginning of an animation that I ultimately created that mapped out the movements of different basketball players. So were they moving because they wanted to pass the ball, because they wanted to shoot the ball, because they wanted to defend someone? And that was also really, really cool to see how I could combine my love for sports, as you know, that I was really heavily involved during middle school computers. Then my high school actually offers an internship program that we do in lieu of classes our senior year. So instead of going to 7 periods a day, I had the opportunity instead to go to 4 classes a day and then I would go to internship as like the other 3 classes. And so I interned at a local startup called Sensoria Health, and they do a lot of cool work with clinical research and things like that. So expediting the rehabilitation process for patients by connecting doctors and patients virtually, so doctors can track based on devices that patients wear how well they're adhering to the requirements or the instructions that the doctor has given them. Because otherwise how it happens is that you have to go periodically back to the doctor and they're like, hey, you're not doing this right, like let's change up, and that increases rehabilitation times a lot. So if can watch it from their computer and see the data themselves, they can basically give those recommendations live. So that was really cool to work on, and still to work on. I got to do a lot of mobile app development, web app development, and then hardware testing, everything in between. And because it was a startup, it really gave me the opportunity to get my hands dirty in a lot of different aspects of business and technical development. So I guess the biggest takeaway from this is that I had the opportunity to interact and engage with all kinds of experiences. I got to do a very structured research program to begin with. Then the next summer I did independent research. The one at the UW was a lot more of me being on my own and then maybe asking a professor or a lab researcher for help here and there. And then I got to work at a government organization like NASA, which is really, really fun to see the internal mechanisms of that. And see what kind of work they're doing. You always think of NASA as like, oh, they must be just launching stuff into space. Like, how could they do anything else? They're doing a lot of things on Earth as well. So NASA's goal is really to not only make our experiences in space better and more productive, but also on Earth. And then at the startup experience was very valuable, because I think if you're going to get an internship, probably one of the best places to do so is at a startup, because you get such an intimate perspective regarding every aspect of the business that you'll never get at like a bigger organization. You'll always be confined to the team, but at a startup, the entire company is that team. And it's a really great way to have flexible tasks and then also get your hands dirty with a ton of different kinds of things. So my tips for this, regardless of whether you're interested in CS or the humanities, is to do the following. So first, definitely be proactive in applying for local and or national programs. One isn't better than the other. Just because it's like national or local doesn't mean it's more like exciting or anything like that. I think the quality of programming at a local level is very, very high, and you don't have to go out of state to get that. So apply to those kinds of programs. Go to conferences in your areas. If there's like a women tech conference, just show up. Like they'll be really excited to see that a high school girl, or even if like it's just tech conference and you're a guy, they're excited to see that you took that initiative and you wanted to show up to these different events or conferences. So definitely keep yourself engaged at a local level. And if you're in a region where there's not a lot of opportunity, there's a ton of virtual programs you can do both inside and outside of like the COVID experience or range. And then also you can definitely look for out-of-state programs, and a good amount of them some of them are free, some of them are paid for. I think none of the programs I went to, I actually had to pay for. The Stanford one, technically you do, but they give really generous scholarships. So at the end of the day, I don't think I had to pay much, if anything at all. So those are really good opportunities. My biggest piece of advice would be to explore different fields while you can. High school is the prime experiential time to like just do anything and everything. When you get into college, everyone's like, oh, you're doing this major, so you probably want to do work experience related to that so you can get a job later on that's, relevant to what you've learned. So when you have this time in high school where you're taking 7 completely different subjects a day, you're looking more at breadth rather than depth, and you can do both. You can start with breadth and then find something you really, really like and then hone in on it and capitalizes on that experience. But that's something I wish I did a little bit more of. I think although my experiences were pretty cool in that they had a lot of different things going into them, they were all very CS centric. I really love the humanities as well. I loved it more than STEM like at one point of my life. So I wish I had done a little bit more of experiences regarding the humanities, but I'm not like regretting it too much. I think if you know something that you're really interested in, don't force yourself to do other things if you already have that perspective. And then make long-lasting connections with the people you meet at internships and programs, with the professors especially. If you have a LinkedIn, I didn't really use a LinkedIn until quarantine because then I got bored and I was like, let me fill out my profile. But I think it would be cool if you have a LinkedIn just to put your school and maybe some of the clubs that you do, or if you're a volunteer at some organization, put that down and then connect with these people after you meet them, so that you have that kind of thread between you and them. It's not just completely you met them and then it's over. Reach out for internships. This means cold calling people, cold emailing people, even just like looking up startups in your area. There's websites that kind of give you like what are the different companies or startups. Those people are going to be the most welcoming because it's the most casual there. Like if I like email Microsoft's going to be like, no, like we don't want you. We have all of these other people, or like we have a lot more liability because we're a bigger company. So reach out for these kinds of intimate organizations or nonprofits or whatever you want to work in your area. And then this one is also really important. Take online courses and build personal projects. If you can't, get your foot in the door at like someone else's organization, what's stopping you from doing something on your own? There's so many free online courses that you can audit on Coursera and things like that. And you can also, a lot of those courses end up making you build your own project. So whether that's like something related to poetry, you could build your own anthology or like a little like portfolio of like work that you've done, or it could be something more like biology related where you write a paper or you do some sort of like review on some concept or new discovery. So there's a lot of room for you to just take initiative. And I don't know if this is the same for all of you, but I had a lot more of like the drive to do this earlier in high school than later. Like right now I've like tried to start like 2 Coursera's, and after the first video I'm like, okay, no, I don't want to do this. But back when I was in like freshman or sophomore year, I was like really into this kind of stuff. So if you're still at that point, or if you still have that drive, capitalize it on it now, because you don't know if you'll have it 2 years down the line where you're like burnt out or like really tired or just kind of over it. And then rejection also doesn't mean anything. You apply for internships, and everyone I talk to, like including myself, like for every 10 internships you apply to, maybe only one will say yes. Maybe for every 50, only one will say yes. For every 100, one will say yes. So rejection does not mean anything, because they don't actually know who you are. They could have just missed the email. They could have not really needed you at that point. Like they didn't have a place for you, or whatever the reason may be, is not a reflection of yourself. It's a reflection of that organization or whatever they needed or could accommodate at that point. So the second thing that I want to go into is community, and community outreach and service in particular. So the first thing that really defined my high school experience was being part of the TEDx Youth at Redmond committee. So the way that I found out about this was that actually my older sister was part of the committee, and I was like, oh, well, this is a really cool experience. It's all giving a platform to youth voices, people who are doing really cool things in their local, national, and international communities. And I thought it would be a super cool and chill experience. So I applied for the board my freshman year, and then I was on it for 3 years. And since I was the longest member at that point, because all of them had graduated, I became the president for my senior year, and we ran our 2019 conference, which was really cool. We hold it at the Microsoft Commons every year, and it was super fun, engaging, and gave me the chance to meet all kinds of people. So that was probably the best thing that I got out of the experience, just the friends that I made who were interested in all different kinds of things. I don't think any of us on the board had like the same exact like interests and passions. It was really, really diverse. And then the speakers are also so empowering and inspiring. So hearing other people's stories is definitely a plus. But alongside that, this is probably the biggest time commitment I had during high school. That was EduSTEM. So I co-founded this in 2017 at a very local level, and it was personally meaningful to me. If you see the picture up here, this is from like this video thing. And this is one of my favorite quotes, where it was like, nothing here feels right. And that's how I felt when I was at that computer science class with all boys and just one other. And I use that to maybe catalyze positive change in my community, to change things around and provide more opportunity and accessibility to youths in my area. So I also realized later on that I had a ton of resources to help other young people start projects related to STEM in their communities. So that's how we expanded and evolved into today. We have around 26 chapters in 8 countries, and we've held over 200 workshops, programs, and events worldwide, impacting 2,800 youths from primarily minority backgrounds. So this can be girls, this can be youths from lower income or underserved neighborhoods or schools, and then also racial minorities as well. And how that process really worked was very, very organic, and I would probably even use the word scrappy. So we started as a really small community service program with myself and two other girls at Jubilee Reach, which is a local community center that catered towards kids whose parents work really long hours, so they need those aftercare resources or before care. So it was really us waking up at 6 a.m. every Wednesday to teach these kids before they head off to their elementary school, which is like a 5-minute walk away. And so I had no intention of growing this to what it is today. It just really happened naturally. And what I just wanted to do was to start with my community and see what problems did I see, what people did I see overlooked, and how could I help them out and use my time to serve them. So that's how it started. And then after that, what really I guess grew it was going into that sailors program where I saw a lot of other girls who wanted to do similar things, and me realizing that I had already created and accumulated so much curriculum and so many logistical resources based off of the work that I did at home that I could use to help them as well. And another really pivotal point for EduSTEM was our first grant that we got from Disney and Youth Service America, and that helped fund our first large-scale event outside of Jubilee Reach, which was called EduSTEM Girls Day in January of 2017. And we brought together, it's an annual event, so we've held it for 3 years now, and it brings together anywhere from the first year around 50 girls to 70 to 80 girls in the second and third year. So that was really amazing. And then we've also worked with Microsoft to hold free workshops at their headquarters where they provide the space and the computers for, again, youths of any background, any financial status, or there's no barrier to entry for any of these workshops. Whoever needs it and whoever has the opportunity to join us are totally welcome. So that's how we started locally, and we've run quite a few summer camps, workshops, programs, and then our now Jubilee Reach program, which is going into its 4th year. So that's been really exciting. So then after that, we expanded into more of an international outreach organization where we were getting tons of grant funding from all these different corporations like Disney, the Hershey Company, Vital Voices, AI for All, which is the organization that I went to through their program at Stanford. And we gave out micro grants to these different community leaders who are all youth. So everyone on our team, they're all youth leaders. So we call them our regional directors. And this one, the top picture is from Turkey. The middle picture is from Thailand, and then the bottom picture is from Nigeria. And those are just some of the workshops that we've been able to support, both curriculum-wise and then also funding. And it's been really empowering and just ultimately just so fulfilling, and it just makes me so happy to see that the smallest things, like even just giving $50 to $500 to any of these workshops, can create such an impact, and not only give opportunities to youths to learn about STEM, but to those respective chapter leaders to take initiative and become leaders in their own hometowns, which has been a really awesome process to be a part of. So that's kind of been how EduSTEM has worked over the past three years. So we started in 2017, and another thing that it led to was opening a lot of doors, not only for organization, but for me as an individual to learn and grow through community service and outreach. So the first conference that I went to was in, again, Stanford, the year after I went to that program. It was called the She++ Summit. So if you're doing any work in community service and STEM, definitely apply for it. They fly you out basically for free to Stanford and Palo Alto for around I think 4 days. So I went to that in 2018, and it was a really awesome experience. I had a lot of fun. And then later that June, I went to the other summit, and basically all these experiences are paid for. So you don't have to pay to travel, which makes them really accessible to you, regardless of whether you can afford it or not. So this one was called the Her Lead Summit, which just brings 30 girls who are doing some work in their communities or on a national level together for a conference experience regarding mentorship, project development, and leadership. So that was in New York, June of 2018. Then after that, in March of 2019, I went to New York again for the Just Peace Summit. So has anyone here heard of Chris Cuomo? He's kind of gotten popular because his brother is the governor of New York, and they're on TV somewhat often. But this picture is of a few of us, and then Chris is sitting here in that gray blazer thing in the middle. And so we got to do a round table with him, which was super, super scary because he's a very like intimidating presence. Like he knows what he's doing. But it was also really exciting. So that was part of the summit, which was around nine or 10 days. And it's held by an organization called We Are Family Foundation. And then that summer, so July of 2019, I went to Panama for 10 days, I think. Yeah, 10 days. And it was with like 7 other teens I'd never met before from all across the nation. And we just explored, we did a ton of fun things. It was basically kind of a STEM related exploration trip. So whether it was like field research or even like the intertwining history in STEM, that was a really, really awesome experience. And we had a lot of funny stories and lifelong friendships that came out of that trip. So that was a lot of fun. And then I went to New York again, which is so funny because before this, I had never been to New York. And then all of a sudden I found myself going like 3 times in a year and a half. I went to New York again to speak at like this conference called the Fast Company Innovation Festival. And that was also a lot of fun to do that. And then the most recent one that I went to before all of this coronavirus stuff happened was in November of 2019. And that was in a country called Qatar, which is kind of like next to Saudi Arabia and Dubai, like the UAE. And that was also a really awesome experience. They hold the World Innovation Summit for Education every 2 years, and then 25 youth fellows of sorts. So like if you're 16 to 25 years old, you can apply. They bring them together to like speak on panels, give like talks during lineups, and kind of contribute a youth voice to a conference that is surrounding educational development and innovation. So those are some of the doors that have been opened through community service and outreach. And I'm really, really grateful for all of these experiences because I got to learn a lot about myself and also about the people around me, regardless of whether they live here in Seattle or on the other side of the country or even on the other side of the world. So my tips when it comes to community service is to, number one, do it because you love it. Because if you're just doing it for like any other reason, you're not going to have fun. And it's probably going to be more of like, you know, a burden or like a chore than it is something that's exciting and something that you look forward to doing. So just kind of ask yourself, like, am I willing to put my 100% into this now? And do I think I'll be willing to do that maybe 1 year into the future? And this is not to say that you shouldn't like change your projects or kind of you find new things that you're interested in and then mix that up. Like totally go ahead and do that. But your intention from the beginning should be whatever you're going to pursue, you should put your 100% into it, because community service is not really something you're doing for yourself. It's something you're doing for others. So that like 100% reflects in the work that you do. If you run a camp and you're like, oh, this is so annoying and boring, I don't want to do this, like your participants are going to get that same message. And ultimately at the end of the day, like regardless of what service work you do, it's all about encouraging positivity and change for social good. So definitely the attitude matters so, so much. And also take advantage of these opportunities to grow, learn, and explore. So a lot of the conferences that I've gone to have helped EduSTEM in immense ways, whether that's been through grant funding opportunities or connecting us with partners that have really propelled our work, or just even helped me grow as a person and as a leader within our organization to bring us to the next level. It's always inspiring me to do more because I see so many other youths and I'm surrounded by so many other amazing people doing absolutely phenomenal things. At such a young age, especially too. And then if you aren't inclined to start your own thing, it's not always recommended to start your own initiative. If something like that already exists in your area, I think it's like you don't want to reinvent the wheel. In fact, you want to partner with organizations and amplify their impact in that area. So you can join a local or national organization that's doing work that you're really interested in. But if you do end up starting your own project, my biggest piece of advice is to build the right kind of team. So when I started EduSTEM, it was really, again, like casual, like it wasn't like something that I thought would like grow into this. So I don't think at that point I knew like what team would be right for me or what team would be right for the organization. And over time, that's caused kind of our organization to evolve, like new people to come into certain positions and things like that. And I think just starting with the right team, starting with people who are there for the right reasons is really important if you want that to be, you know, mutually beneficial to your relationship with them and then also to the organization. So make sure that you're very careful. Always prioritize quality over quantity. If you have 5 people that do like half the work they should versus like 3 people who do all the work they should, obviously the latter is the better option. apply for grants. There's a ton of youth-related grants. You can just look that up on Google. Well, actually, I hesitate to say a ton because a lot of them have like this requirement that you have to be like a 501c3, which isn't always the best option for your project. But there's a lot of options that you can look at. One is Youth Service America. One is AI for All. Hershey's, I think they do theirs pretty annually. The Disney one got discontinued, but I'm sure there's something that's popped up in place of that. But yeah, those are some of the grants that you should definitely take a look at. And then also, impact is not equal to the numbers. Impact is more equal to the narratives that come out of those events or workshops or programs that you run. So make sure that you're also, again, quality over quantity. Like for EduSTEM, we worked with the same 5 kids for half a year before we expanded at all, because we knew that long-term impact is a lot more powerful than, like maybe doing one workshop for like 100 kids. Like they're just gonna go home. Do they have the resources to continue? Do they have that mentorship? Do they have those role models from those experiences? Not really. So make sure that you're always prioritizing, what are my kids gonna say about this workshop or this event or this fundraiser or whatever you want to hold after they come out of it. Like, will it make them, feel more accepted, feel more loved, feel more empowered to do what they want to do? And that's really, really critical. And then the last thing that I want to talk about is the college apps process. So this one, to preface, college apps are completely random and you are always lucky, no matter what. Like whether you get into like every single college you apply to, there's always an element of luck involved in every single decision. And they also say absolutely nothing about who you are. There's really amazing people that get rejected from colleges that they really want to go to, and then there's not so amazing people who get into colleges that that are really like prestigious or whatever you want to think about those. So definitely do not like accredit that to your value or your personal goals or how good you are as a person, because that's not how it works. And then also college apps, I think it's really fundamental for us to understand, especially if we're in a position of privilege, is that they are a really prime example of inequity. Not everyone has the same opportunities as everyone else. And I know that for me personally, like the chance to even apply to some of these schools, like other students just didn't even consider it because of money, because of like mobility, because maybe they had to stay home and help their families. So keep that in mind, and also be really thankful, regardless of the result, that you had the opportunity to apply to college and you had that support to do so during that process. Do not also revolve your life around college apps. Do not do activities because you want to get into college, because I've like personally witnessed people do this, and then once they get into college, they kind of lose that sense of purpose and they don't really know why they do things, I guess. So try not to do that, because it's just really bad for your mindset in the long term. And then also don't compare yourself to others during the process, because it's so arbitrary and it's so like subjective that like there's no one person that's better or more qualified to get into a school than the other person. And this can lead to a lot of, negative vibes that you just don't want to experience. So for me personally, I like tried really hard just to be like, everyone, will end up totally fine. Everything works out. And they got in. So for me, like this is kind of the hows and whys of Princeton specifically, since that is a school that I did end up committing to. So I did submit my application in the regular decision, and I really loved my interviewer. She was actually a 2019 graduate, so super young, like fresh out of college, and she was super, super like articulate, inspiring, amazing, and really overall a great person. But it doesn't really matter how your interview goes, if I'm going to be honest. Like I think it's not indicative of whether you get in or not, because it holds pretty little weight in the grand scheme of things, because they don't really have control over what the interviewer writes or what you say or what actually happened. Like they have a very narrow perspective as to what that interview encompassed. And then decision day came along and I got in, and then how I really decided was just looking at the location, the social life, and then the particular like major options. So location, I absolutely loved it because it's in a suburb, like a nice bubble, but it's only 1 hour away from New York and 1 hour away from, or New York City, and then 1 hour away from Philadelphia. So you have access to like a lot of urban environments, and you, at the same time, you're not getting constantly distracted by them. And then I also like the social life. They have a pretty interesting thing called eating clubs. So it's not like a sorority fraternity, because I don't think I would join like a sorority, but it's almost like everyone kind of joins eating clubs, like 70% of the student population, and it's just kind of like a place where you eat your meals, where you do social events and things like that. So I really like that like unique aspect of social life because no other school has that. And then another thing that was definitely a big selling point was the flexibility in getting a CS major. And so there was either like an arts CS major or engineering CS major option. And I love that flexibility because sometimes schools only offer CS in the engineering department. But I applied as an engineering major, but I actually just kind of like did a switcheroo a few weeks ago into like the arts, Bachelor of Arts major, because you take the exact same CS classes, you're getting the same technical degree, but you get to take a lot of humanities and interdisciplinary courses instead of like doing like physics and chemistry, which personally would not have been very compelling to me, even though I totally respect people who are good and love physics and chemistry because those are some hard subjects. And then this one was my biggest selling point. It was like talking to a ton of alumni, and all of them that I talked to said they loved the school like immensely. They like had only good things to say. And even though it's a hard school, like the fact that they said it was really hard, but they still had such positive things to say about it, I thought was like pretty special. Like even though they probably suffered through like the academics, coming out of it, like regardless of whether that alumni was like fresh out of college, a few years out of college, or even like still at Princeton, just like maybe a sophomore or junior, that was really telling. So definitely if people can vouch for that university, that's going to be the biggest thing of how you choose one. And then I committed, so that was pretty good. That was a pretty good day. I was pretty happy and I was really excited for what was to come. And at the end of the day, I did get lucky. If someone else had gotten my application, I could have just not gotten in. Like that's just a matter of fact. It wasn't because, you know, I stood out like immensely compared to other people. It was just because I had the right people look at the right things at the right time. And that's how the process works. So I know I'm probably like running short on time. I hope I'm not. I hope like 10 minutes is okay for a Q&A. But I'll pretty much wrap this up. But where to apply and choose, how to decide that is for the where to apply. You want to start looking early. A lot of colleges have scholarship programs, honors programs, and major specific programs. And you want to like maybe some of them have early deadlines. Some of them maybe, I know like USC, if you apply by December 1st, you can like be eligible for a full or half tuition scholarship. So definitely start a little bit early. You don't have to start writing your essays early. Just look at where you want to apply and what sort of inter programs you want to apply to within those schools. And then also think about what is it at this school that's particularly compelling that I can't get anywhere else. And then along with applying early, also reach out to your regional admissions officers if you have any questions, because not only does it demonstrate interest, I don't know personally if this works or not, like reaching out and demonstrating interest, but it also, they'll be really helpful because they want you to apply to their school because they make money. So then how you choose your school is that I think your money matters a lot. Remember at the end of the day, something that we've especially seen during COVID is that these schools, and I don't know if you guys watched like Hassan Minhaj's Patriot Act, but he kind of said this in a recent episode where these schools are businesses before they're like actually educational institutions. They're like really hung up upon like endowments and things like that. So really like don't give them like a time of if they reject you, like whatever, it doesn't matter. Like they're not like real testaments to who you are, because all they want is like money. All they want is like a student base that will make them look good in whatever way they think looking good is. So also think about the student body and location, the clubs, social life and activities. Are there like good programs for career opportunities, whether that's internships or other like sorts of jobs after you graduate? What do the students say? That's the most important one. What does your gut say? That's also very important. And then also make, if you want to and you're really confused as to where you want to go, make like a 2-year plan or a 4-year plan and kind of look at, okay, what clubs would I join if I go to this school? What classes would I take? What professors would I want to meet? And that gives you a lot more like putting you in the shoes of someone going through that school and whether or not you are happy with the opportunities you get there. And then this is also really important. It doesn't really matter where you go, especially in tech and like science related things, because CS is very democratized. Like I definitely think that if I went to my state school at UW, like they have a really good CS program, I probably would end up at the same job like as if like when I'm going to Princeton. So it doesn't really matter where you go. What does matter is how you use your time outside of class. So internships, leadership, clubs, community outreach, research projects, etc. The mentors and connections that you make. I think a lot of people get jobs most successfully through like personal connections. It's really not a meritocracy. America is not really like that. It's very much like who you know and where you can get into for jobs especially. So make those connections, have a passion, continue that narrative that you've hopefully constructed, be proactive, make friends, have fun. And this is like, obviously I'm not really equipped to give this advice since I haven't even gone on campus, but this is based off of conversations with the graduates. Oh wait. And then to conclude, for many of you guys still in high school, some of my favorite parts of high school that I didn't really talk about much in this presentation, but is probably the most applicable is first balancing your social life. So do hang out with your friends a lot. Don't sacrifice your happiness for like a certain class or a certain extracurricular or like the ACT or SAT or whatever. And also just be a good person to others, because I know like maybe if you go to a school where like college is a really big thing, like after this whole process, no one, I realize, like has more or less respect for someone based off of where they go to. It's more based off of like how they're remembered and their interactions with other people and whether they were like authentic and really good people to others. And then also always take the time to learn about other people. Something that's really defined my journey is like learning from friends at home, learning from friends in different states, and staying connected with my friends in like all around the world. Like one of my best friends lives in Germany, another one like lives in Qatar because I met her at that conference. And that's been a really defining point of my high school. And I think those are just experiences that I would never give away for like any other reason. So thank you so much for listening. If you have any questions, I think the chat works. And my social media and my email is just my name. So if you want to like follow or DM me or email me, totally feel free to.
All right, thank you so much, Arjika. That was really interesting to hear, especially because a lot of us are, at least I'm going to be applying to colleges this fall, so it's like super good advice to hear. So if people just want to raise their hands for the Q&A, while people are raising their hands, Hallie asked, where is it? I saw she asked a question up here. She said, was this a relatively easy decision to commit to Princeton, or were you between a few others as well?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I definitely was between a few schools. I applied mostly to the West Coast because that was like kind of where I wanted to stay, but I applied to like a couple of East Coast schools as well. So I was choosing between like 2 or 3 schools at the end of the day. But I think Princeton stood out to me because like speaking of endowments, I think they like invest a lot in their students, their undergraduate students. They don't have a big graduate school program, so you know that like all of the professors are like dedicated towards you. I think it's one of the only schools that requires professors to teach in-person classes as opposed to just like hiding away in their labs and just doing research and making money for the school. So I thought that was really compelling. I love the area. Again, the alumni really stood out to me. And then, yeah, so that was how I made that decision.
Awesome. Yeah, I think Hallie raised her hand also, so go ahead.
Yeah, I just, well, first off, thank you so much for giving this talk. I think it was very valuable, so thanks for taking the time. I also kind of had, I guess I'm not super STEM oriented, but I'm interested in fields that are fairly male dominated in the same sense. So I've had like similar experiences where it feels a little weird when you're the only girl there, and it feels a little bit disheartening or hard to continue in that kind of field. So I guess how were you able to kind of get over that like mental obstacle or that mental barrier of almost recognizing that you do belong there, that it's not like, you know, a mistake that you're there or something, or you shouldn't be interested in one of those things?
Yeah. So to start off, like what kind of fields are you interested in, or like what kinds of activities have you found that are male dominated?
For me, at least, I do a lot of debate and Model UN, which have mostly guys, and I also play rugby, which is a mostly kind of guy-dominated sport. So I've had to be on like a few guys' teams and stuff like that, which can make it a little bit hard for like the reasons that I talked about, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. So I didn't mention this because it wasn't really related to a lot of the things that I talked about, but I also did debate all 4 years. And I can definitely agree that it's a very like male dominated field. Like both of my partners, I did public forums, so both of them were boys. And I think ultimately what helped me overcome those kinds of feelings of like displacement or not belonging is like actively seeking out communities that encourage participation like for minorities. So I think there's a lot of like women in debate organizations that have popped up. I don't know if you've heard of Beyond Resolved, but that's like a pretty popular one that's popped up. And I think it's a really good forum to talk about and share those experiences you have of like disillusion with your current activity, and then also building that network. It doesn't have to be people, you know, physically in proximity to you, but you can create that sense of closeness over like online or just like by making those communities in your local circuits or outside. So I think actively looking for those communities is a really good way to overcome that, because it's a microcosm of a lot of people experiencing the same thing, that are really there to support each other because they all know that they need that support at some point in their journey.
Awesome. Julia.
Hi, yeah, thanks again for, sharing your experience with us. I was just wondering, so clearly you were a part of a lot of internships, you were traveling a fair amount, it seems. How did you keep yourself from getting like exhausted and burning out? Because I feel like that would be a problem for me.
Yeah, no, that's definitely like a really, really big question. I think something like it sounds like a lot, but like if you think about it, it was over 4 years, so it was kind of spaced out. So those internships would happen during the summer. During the school year, I wouldn't do much like coding or anything like that. I kind of gave myself more time to learn and do my classes. And I think also it kind of sounds weird, but like Edustem was kind of my like relaxation in a way. Like it was something that I genuinely enjoyed doing, and it was kind of my like escapism from everything else. Like I would just go to these workshops, teach it, and I think kids are just so innocent and fun that like it made you feel like it was a really positive and energetic environment. But I think like the way that you would really avoid burnout or exhaustion is to like give yourself dedicated days where you do absolutely nothing. Like you can sleep in, you can just like watch TV, just like everything that's just not productive for your brain, like things that your parents are like, don't do that because it's a waste of time. Like just give yourself one day, like every now and then to do that. I think that gives you the ability to recharge in a sense.
Thanks.
Nice. Yeah, I have a quick question to drop in. So you talked a lot about how you went to a bunch of different conferences and got like a bunch of these things. How did you learn about those?
Mhm. Yeah, that's also a really good question. And it's kind of like every time you open one door, like you see three more doors in front of you, sort of thing. So when I joined like Sailors, that's how I learned about She Plus Plus. When I joined She Plus Plus, that's kind of we all like had kind of heard about Her Lead. When I joined Her Lead, like you meet all these people who've done all these other programs, and you get into this community of a ton of people who are like passionate about running projects to help other people. And then you meet a lot of them. They talk about like programs or conferences they had gone to beforehand. Actually, the girl who nominated me to go to the one in New York, the second one, not the first one or third one, the one with the Chris Cuomo, she was a previous attendee of that conference. So kind of like meeting those people, when you get your foot in one door, like there's so many other places you can go. So just start off, take that risk, and then you never know where you'll end up. Because I did not see myself going to any of these things like 2 years ago or 3 years ago.
Nice, thank you. Jeeves?
Yeah, so I wanted to talk about what Hallie was kind of talking about with the whole debate aspect, because I've been in speech and debate for a few years too, and it's very like one thing about debate is it's definitely anti-minority. Like it's not beneficial towards minorities or towards people that aren't as well off, because it will definitely like benefit a lot of the um more well-off people and like more rich people. And also one thing that I've noticed is just like it's a completely different dynamic when a guy is debating like you versus debating another guy, because the level of respect kind of just like wavers. It's really interesting because it's like it kind of feels like they can raise their voice or be more assertive or dominant and you won't get upset about it. And it's like little things like that going into a more dominant like not minority field, like you can definitely tell, because it's like, oh, when you're debating against a guy, like they will you know be involved in like tiny little microaggressions and things like that. And I know that you've already like talked about it um and things like that, but how did you deal with like the microaggressions? Like, did you ever call them out on it, or did you just like kind of go with it? Like, was there ever a point where you just like snapped? Because I've done that before.
Yeah, no, that's very, very true. And I think like microaggressions are probably the most like prevalent form of, making people feel like excluded from an activity, because, there's no way you can be like, they didn't like explicitly do something that you could just be like, oh my God, like that's so wrong. But then if you do point it out, they're like, oh, you're just being sensitive, or like, it didn't actually happen. You're just like making that up. And I think like the solution for that is really hard, because again, like I've never called someone out because I've always felt like, oh, what if like it was in my head? Like, what if I was just thinking about it? But what I've done is that as I made friends on the circuit that I'm in, like I debated pretty locally, because like I didn't really have the resources to like pay to go to tournaments outside of my state super often. But something I did do was I made friends with like people on their team, and I would kind of talk to them about it. I'd be like, hey, could you tell them maybe like tone it down a little bit or something like that. So I think using like first degree or second degree connections to get that message across, so you're not like in the line of fire, is a good way. And I think also just like bringing awareness to the issue on like a structural level. So people have like written papers about how like women are like given less speaker points and things like that because like specifically of gender. We have like sometimes the people who are part of Beyond Resolve, like the woman-oriented debate organization, like have tables and they like kind of show like these statistics, or they give out stickers and things like that. So maybe like even building those initiatives like in your area to be like, I'm aware of these problems. And then the guys also kind of think about it themselves. They're like, oh, am I like part of the problem? Like, what have I been doing to like make this issue like really, really prevalent in my area? So I think it's very implicit the way that you call them out, because if you call them out very explicitly, they either get defensive or they just like don't care. But I think both are actually like good ways. It depends on who you're talking to and how they receive your message.
Nice. So maybe one question from the chat and then Supriya, and then we can finish off. So Sophie asked, did you go through the process of establishing your organization as a 501c3? If so, how was that process? If not, was there a particular reason you decided not to pursue that?
That's also a really, really good question. And we did not go through the process of establishing a 501c3, but that's something that we're going to be most likely, like 80% sure, doing in the future. And the reason why I decided not to pursue that is that there's a lot of like logistical headache that comes with that kind of detracts from like the fun that you get running that organization. Like I really had more of an interest in like actually hands-on, like being on the ground, helping kids, running these workshops, rather than sitting and like filling out all these forms and like paying all these fees. So it's really, it's also something you want to consider is like, are you adding not value to that nonprofit sector? Like if you're not really doing anything that someone hasn't already done before, like you probably don't want to apply as an organization. I think IGSTEM was like a bit unique in how we facilitated our workshops, but because it was just a lot of like a headache, we didn't do that initially. And we also weren't expecting to grow either. So we were like, oh, like why would we need to do this? We're kind of just a program. But we're going to do that in the future. And the thing that's changed is that we have a lot more like international chapters, and we need a lot more credibility to apply to certain grants and things like that. But before then, we did have the ability to get funding without 501c3 status, which was like the biggest thing.
Nice. And then maybe for a last question, go ahead, Supriya.
Thank you again for your time. I know people have said a little already, but it's like so inspirational and just really inspiring. I had a few questions actually, kind of varying like upon grants and everything. So like, what was your process for applying for grants and also getting support? And like, how did you balance your STEM education in school from like, and also like in internships and also CANEM? And then also I had one more question about like catering to minorities with like or clubs or other things, and like if you had any advice on that as well.
Yeah, definitely. So the first one was about grants, right? Like how did the process of going through grants? Yeah, okay. So it varies based off of who you're asking the grant from, but the same thing applies that you always have to write a grant report. So it's like, what does your organization do? What is its purpose? And then why do you need this funding? Like, what are you going to do with this funding? Some of them ask for specific like balance sheets, like tell me like dollar, like by like cent by cent, like what will you be spending money on in the next year? And why does this grant like help support that? And then also I think another thing that they ask for is also like a lot of like, how are you planning to grow? So why, like, are you going to just kind of keep things as they are with this grant, or are you really going to try something new or do something, take a risk or something like that. So I think those are the main steps. It's writing that grant report, which can probably take a long time. It's a lot of like writing essays and then also doing some financial calculations. But there's that, and then I think your second one is like how do you like reach out to minorities in general?
Yes.
Okay, so that's a really, really important question because it's hard. Like sometimes you can't say like, I want this particular kid to come to my workshop, right? Like that can be a little bit alienating, but I think the best way to do it is to like do it geographically. So find like a region or a location that caters to like kids who like are under-resourced or underfunded and work with them first. So like I live in a suburb that's relatively affluent actually, like there's not, our like average income and stuff is like pretty high compared to the rest of America, but we still have pockets of people who are, you know, like overlooked, who are kind of falling through those cracks because this place is regarded as like, oh, there must be so many resources and things like that. So I kind of like found those regions. I looked at the demographics of the different areas within my hometown, and I reached out to those schools or those organizations that catered specifically to those students. And then also you can work with like cultural organizations and things like that. There's a lot of, you know, students of color, like empowerment organizations. If you partner with them, you'll get a lot of the students who work with them already to join your workshops. And then also, you could also hold girls only events, which I think are a lot more like easier to kind of close off because I think it's a lot more of the norm. So it's weird to be like, oh, I want to like teach kids of this demographic if you're not personally of that demographic. But if you're a girl, you know, it's a lot easier to kind of be like, hey, this is like all about sisterhood, women's empowerment, and then intertwining that with whatever subject or material you want.
Thank you.
All right, so thank you so much, Archika. This talk was really amazing and inspiring to us all. And I will upload it to YouTube so that a bunch of people who weren't able to make it can watch it. And so, yeah, I think this concludes our talk, but thank you so much, and I really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for, again, organizing this. And thank you to everyone who came.
Of course. All right, bye, everyone. See you next week.